vice chairman and as board member focused on the overall direction and strategy of Faith Search Partners. As president of the Mission Enterprise Division, Greg provides the operating management for the division and also serves as senior consultant for a variety of national and international clients. He was founding leader of Halftime Talent Solutions prior to its merger with Faith Search Partners and developed the operating model for the organization as a way to bring cost-effective, high-quality management, recruiting, and talent acquisition services to the faith-based nonprofit community. Greg received his Master's of Arts degree in Religion Psychology from Baylor University and earned a Master's of Consulting Psychology from the University of North Texas. He resides in Dallas with his wife of 30 years and has 3 children. Now, on a personal note, I can say that Greg is also a dedicated volunteer for the Baylor Alumni. He's a regular attendee at the Business Professional Monthly Networking Breakfast in Dallas, and he currently serves on the board of Alumni Advocates. And with that said, Greg, I turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Most important, a 76 alum of Baylor and KOT and former Yale leader at Baylor during the first Southwest Conference Championship year in 50 years back in 1974 and 5. Grateful to be with you today. What a treat. We're so much anticipating this second installment with our panel today, and grateful for the Office of Alumni Engagement sponsorship of another way for us to enhance the career seeking activities and the career enhancement activities that you guys are here to learn about today. Great panelists. We have joining us Nikki Gibson, who is originally from Mississippi and an undergraduate from Mississippi State, but got her MBA with Baylor in the Executive MBA program. She is a world-class talent acquisition leader. This is her second stint at JCPenney's. She's had a number of other very successful experiences, Yum Brands, Johnson & Johnson, across industries. She's also an expert in social recruiting strategies and has presented at that conference. So this is an important part of the contribution that we'll make, hopefully, to your plans today and how to execute a search strategy. Ian Marshall is joining us today, also an EMBA grad, an undergraduate from Texas Tech. Ian is the VP of Organizational Learning and Development today for RealPage Incorporated, which is a global software and data analytics company focusing on the real estate industry. Has had a great career doing this kind of talent development inside organizations at Hunt Oil, Coca-Cola, Southwest Airlines, and others. We're grateful for his participation. And Dilshan Rathnayaka is also joining us today. He's the EVP and Chief People Officer for a company called Securonics, which is working in the cybersecurity space. Dilshan's had a number of people leadership roles in other great organizations, Aramark, Sabre, and others. And so we're grateful for his participation today. But Nikki is really going to lead our conversation this session, talking about the talent, the actual process of seeking new careers. We dealt last week with, or before Thanksgiving, with how to plan for career transition. Today, we're actually talking about executing a career transition strategy. And then, as Rob mentioned, on the 15th of December, we'll have our third installment where we're talking about sort of bringing some closure to that sort of thing. So without further ado, Nikki, let me turn to you.
Great, thank you. Super excited to have an opportunity to chat with everyone about something I'm super passionate about. What I first wanted to do is we had a great session with Dilshan and Ian a couple of weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, and they talked a little bit about the pregame, the discovery and planning. Today's session is really going to be about the game, execution and agility, and Dilshan and I will tag team this topic together. And then, as mentioned, next week we will talk a little bit about adjourning and renewing. But just to give, if anybody wasn't on the call last week, we wanted to just give a little bit of a recap so that you understood what we were not going to talk about, but then also to see what you missed. So if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So the pregame, a little bit of a review. We talked a lot about the planning, and some of the aspects of planning that we talked about really were centered around looking for those target companies, the target role, the target geography, and then the target total rewards. And in summary, really, it's very, very important for you to know all of these aspects for yourself, but also the point, because we're a family, and we have families a lot of times, we also need to include our families in these conversations, because we definitely don't want our families to be caught off guard by some of the things that we're thinking about from our own career transition. It's very important for you to be focused, but then also to be planful. And then secondly, what we talked about is we use the analogy of football here. So you've got off season, kind of the optimal team activity, then also the training. And really, this was really around, making sure you got all your ducks in a row, making sure your resume is complete. You know what your personal brand is, your LinkedIn profile, your networking in terms of any of your social media, but then also rounding things out by seeking feedback. I think that's one of the pieces that people forget about, especially when you're getting ready to get into that transition, whether you were doing it on your own or you had to do it. You have to seek that feedback. And so those are the things that we talked about last time. So now let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. Really, last time we talked about football, and this time we're going to talk about the execution from a baseball perspective. And you'll see sort of a baseball diamond here when it comes down to you're in the game. So what this means, you are in the game, you have talked to a recruiter and you're like, what's next? So the first thing before we get into the what's next, let's talk about everybody who's involved in the what's next. The first person that's involved is you. What do you have to offer? You are the player. The next person involved is the recruiter. The recruiter holds the key to playing ball. The recruiter is the coach. Next is the hiring manager. We might say that this is the most important person on the whole team. This is the final decision maker. This is the owner. And then we've got, all those people who are out there in the stands cheering you on, supporting you throughout the game, throughout this transition. And these are the fans. So let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into the player, the you. So I'm just a little bit, thank you so much for talking a little bit about my background, but what I am at the end of the day, I'm a recruiter. And so what you're getting today is firsthand information from me as a recruiter and the things that I always talk to candidates about when they're in that recruiting process. So the first thing as the player, what you need to know is you need to know the rules. And when you say, well, what are the rules? Well, the rules are really the interview process. I'm surprised a lot of times that people don't ask about, well, what's the interview process? What can I expect? You have to understand what to expect throughout the process because it'll give you, I would say, some insight into planning and making sure you don't get your hopes up, just making sure you've got your mind in the right place. The next thing is all about adhering to the rules. And I'll give you a little bit of insight into recruiters. We like to be in control of the recruiting process. It's what we're hired to do. Go back to the other slide, I'm still talking about, the player. You have to adhere to the rules. And really what that means for us is we want to know what's happening. We have told you what the interview process is. And one of the things that we really want to make sure is that you adhere to the interview process. So I use the analogy, don't go and ping the hiring manager when the recruiter doesn't know that you're going to actually contact the hiring manager, because the first thing that the hiring manager is going to do is they're going to go back to the recruiter and say, hey, candidate A, B, or C contacted me. Have you not talked to them? So that's one thing to be very aware of is, as the player, you got to know the rules and you got to adhere to the rules. The final thing here is know your position. And so if you think about a lineup, you've got the the person that hits first, second, third, fourth, and you've got the last person that hits. Know where you stand in the process. And the best way to know that is you have to ask the question. Know where you rank and stack against others that are in the process. That will help you along the way, especially when you start to talk to the hiring manager and other people in the interview process. So now let's talk a little bit about the recruiter and the role that the recruiter plays in the process. So the recruiter is the coach. So the recruiter knows the players. So when you think about it, the recruiter holds the key. He holds the key to playing ball. The recruiter is talking to every single individual, looking at all the resumes, and they know who all the players are. They also communicate the play. So if you recall, I just said, hey, make sure you know where you are in the lineup. The recruiter has all the information that you need to be able to be successful while you're covering your bases, while you're in the process, while you're actually in the game. And what a lot of people don't know, and this is something that, again, giving you a little bit of insight into recruiting, is we actually have the ability to adjust the plays to win the game. So you say, well, what does that mean, adjust the plays? Remember, we know all the players. We're communicating the plays. We're communicating with the hiring manager. We're communicating with you, the player. So if we see that we need to adjust what we're looking for from a skills perspective, we need to change a few things on the timeline, we have the ability to influence the hiring manager. So again, when I go back to your role is to adhere to the rules of the game. And part of that is because the recruiter knows what's happening in the game. Let's transition into the hiring manager. So I think everybody understands that the hiring manager makes the final decision. And so, but also the hiring manager creates the rules. And so the rules are equated to the skills and all of the things that they're looking for in filling this particular position. They've also know all the plays. They know all the plays. They know all the players. They know what's going on. They know who's in the mix. And they've also, like I said, they've created the plays too, along with the recruiter. But finally, I think this is the cool part. As you are in the game and you're talking to the recruiter and you're talking to the hiring manager and you start getting in the interview process, the hiring manager, the owner, also can execute trades. And so if you think about a baseball team and you've got so many different players and they've got so many different skills and so forth, and you've determined you need this particular skill set. However, you've seen all these different players yourself as the candidate, and you're like, oh, maybe I don't need that particular skill. Maybe I need this skill. And oh, by the way, that player has that skill and that player could be you. And so they have the ability to adjust I would say, the interview selection process in the middle of the game, in the middle of the season, because they've noticed that there's a skill set that they need, that they're willing to trade to get that person on their team. And then finally, what we have here is your network. So your network, these are the people out there that are cheering you on along the way. As you're in the interview process, I would be willing to bet each step of the way, you've got a couple of people that you're talking to. They're your support system. They've got all the banners and they're saying, go you, go you, go you. And that's all well and good. And you also have to remember, this is your network too. So that network could be someone, for example, that actually referred you to the role. And there's a possibility, just like a fan that's sitting in the stands, they could change sides. And so the advice here is to really be mindful of who you're talking to throughout the process. I always tell people, especially if the person that referred you or if it's someone in your network that's working for the company, that you're trying to get into, I always say temper the amount of information that you provide to them, because that fan could change sides, and it could be as small as they may not know information to be able to provide you, and that could give a little bit of a rub on that networking relationship that you have. So just kind of in summary, when we're talking about covering the bases, you got to remember you're the player. What do you have to offer? You have to be able to articulate that. You have to follow the rules. You got to stay within the guardrails. The recruiter is the coach. That's your go-to person. In anything, in any sort of search process, that is your go-to person. And then you've got the hiring manager, the owner. He or she owns everything, and they are the ones who are making the decisions. And then finally, your network. Make sure that you have a good support system while you're in the game. But remember, and this is so, and I've had this happen to myself, remember, there's a possibility that your fan could change sides. And so with that in mind, when you think about that, there's the psychological part about being in the game. It's not just about all of the mechanics that I've just talked about and so forth. There's a real psychological and mental piece about being able to stay in the game. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dilshan, and he's going to talk a little bit about the mental piece and the agility that you need to stay in the game.
Thank you, Nikki. Those of you who are here at session one, Ian and I talked about the planning and discovery phase. Nikki just went through, and we took a lot of time, guys, to make sure we simplify things in a very complex space. So we identified the players, what role everybody plays, but all of this requires personal energy, personal sort of agility as an individual, as an executive, to get this done. And this area is often not spoken, but we thought it was important for you to understand the short game and the long game. And we feel this will be beneficial for you as you go through your search and coach other people. So it's about career agility, and it's about being focused. And I'm going to say the word focus several times. Most people get off a track because this is a very interesting area, and you could keep kind of moving your thoughts, but it's very important to be focused. You have to be fast, and all of that is outstanding, but you have to be flexible. So quoting Charles Darwin, and I think is important. I think you can find your own context, whether it is somebody else has coached you or you have your own favorite philosophers. But one of the thoughts that he had was the strongest of species that survive. It's not the strongest of species that survive, not the most intelligent that survive. And if you look at history, you can find evidence of this, but the most responsive to change, right? And it's an important sort of framework here is that you don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to be the most intelligent, but you got to be the most agile and responsive to change. So there are several sort of spectrums of, agility. Is one, you're staying the course and you're less flexible. And to oversimplify agility, being more flexible is more agile, which gives you the ability to shift and respond to change in the marketplace. I want to just summarize to you throughout your career, throughout your experience, whether it's a work situation or a career transition, career agility is going to be a competitive advantage and mostly unspoken, but extremely needed if you are to succeed in this space. So I want to talk about the mindset of being agile, right? So all of us are a work in progress, and there is no right or wrong answer, but there are like 6 elements of career agility that I think you kind of need to kind of think about or make a little bit of an inventory. One is your commitment. And this basically implies, are you willing to make that activity happen? Are you willing to take some action? I know a ton of friends who I love dearly. They often talk about their next career step. And sadly, or not so sadly, depending the way you look at it, they've been talking about their career for the last 6 years. And I would often ask the simple question, what action have you taken? And they're like, I'm not sure, I'm not ready for it. Guys, commitment is about taking action. So if you're acting, you're one step ahead of everybody else in being agile. The other one is control. Sometimes you have control. And I think Ian and I talked about the reactive and proactive situations. If you are in a proactive situation, meaning you are the one driving the change, you have more control. If you have a impact because of unscheduled event, you're less in control. But in the whole event, you want to monitor the level of control you have, and that gives you a sense of greater agility than in a different context. And another area is your general curiosity. This is again energy um, sort of giving or energy depleting depending on your personality, but your ability to be curious about what's happening in the market. For example, if you are in an industry that's probably having compression, you probably want to sort of be interested in industries that are sort of future employment opportunities, but it requires you to place some level of time to be curious about that. And a lot of people don't take the time to be curious, and eventually they don't know the area or the space. And obviously, something that's going to be important to you as you continue to be more agile as an individual and as probably an individual seeking to be good at career transitions. And then career agility itself, right? Building a mindset of being able to be comfortable in unsettling situations and being flexible. And that is an area of personal muscle building that you need to have. Each of us have nerve points about how we create that. That's important. I'll give you a private place that I have. I have three children and a wife. And one of the things that I have done for myself is I have tried to sort of put away some investment that is only available for career transition. And all of us are in different places. But today's economy, today's workplace, you could be severanced immediately. You may have a choice or not have a choice, but you had to find that balance. Another way I personally find career agility is to create connections and be networked and do things for other people when I don't need any help from other people. So you'll have to create an inventory of items of what that means to you, but an important area as you become more nimble in this space. Another area is creating the connections and relationships. I told you that for me, creating connections gives me agility, and you may want to sort of focus on that. Most people, unfortunately, come for help when they need help. My advice to all of you on the call, and including ourselves who get busy from time to time, is make a note of having relationships, tending to those relationships, and nurturing those relationships, because you really want to do that proactively and not only when you need things. And Ian and I talked about this subject last time, so I won't go into it, but I think you get the point. Be connected proactively versus reactively. And the last one is having confidence. You have to have faith in yourself. You are awesome. You have skills. You are valuable. And in life, as you go through, sometimes you will find recruiters giving you information that may not be to your liking, but you got to fight the fact that that's important data, but it's not going to unsettle your confidence. In my case, I pray a lot. I also have a loving family, and I find friends, and I go do things that exude that confidence. Because I was talking to Nikki the other day, sometimes recruiters have a way of taking your confidence off, but you need to remember that you're in control of your sort of mental state, and that's an important. I bring these subjects into this because this is something people don't talk about. But while you're in the game, while you're playing with those different players in the game, this stuff matters, and it's like the 1/100th of a second that you need to win something out in the marketplace. So I'm going to jump to a model. I think everybody loves models, so I thought this will be a nice visual of what is Dilshan talking about career agility. Is he just throwing something out there that's a cool word? But this is truly a model, right? Look at the left side of responding to change. That's what we just talked about. You have to decide how much of change agility you have personally. And that could be what we talked about: exploring, refining, learning, doing research, knowing your strengths and dislikes about career opportunities. So that is important. Let's park that for a minute and call that your muscle to respond to change. But then the agility itself comes through doing certain things. So I'm going to start with the idea zone. I usually recommend to people take a little sticky note, and you have ideas about what you want to do. You might get feedback from people about what you want to do. You may have read a newspaper article about an emerging market. It's a lot of stuff to hold in your head, but make a note of those ideas as you go through. Maybe you're driving through the drive-through and you saw a billboard, but make a list of ideas that you have for yourself and just constantly manage that. And I think that that's a one important area to sort of explore, that area of having ideas about your future. I think I want to be a professor in my later career. I'm not sure about it. So one of the things I'm doing is talking to PhDs in the market. But what is it to truly be a PhD? So you get the fact it can be as silly as you just exploring something, but you need to get deeper into that subject matter. The second part of creating your agility is having this concept of a active feedback squad. I actually call that my board of directors. And as Nikki and I were talking, when I'm in a career change, I have three groups of people that I focus on. And in this squad is people who love me, my family, my wife, my kids, my best friends, whoever that is, or even my colleagues at work who have energy to give me, who love me personally. People who are going to give me network, that's part of my squad. And lastly, people who can give me a job. So my definition of a squad is those three different constituencies. You might need to define what your squad looks like, because often people find themselves in a lonely place and don't seek that input. You need to create trusted advisors who can think with you, pick you up when you need to, challenge you when you need to, also be able to be an active partner when you need. So that is a part of being agile. Then I'm moving on to this parallel pursuits. What does that really mean? That basically means is you don't have to have one single career track. I'll speak about a colleague of mine who wants to be a vice president, and this individual is a senior director right now. One of the things that they're doing is they're getting on boards, they're getting on speaking engagements to improve their influence without formal authority capacity. So they're doing other things. It's outside of their day job, but it's creating the competency for them to one day be ready when they be ready to have that opportunity. Because right now in their job, they don't get that. So you may be a part of a school district, you may be a part of a charitable organization. All of those opportunities creates capability in what type of jobs you want to have. So in my case, I do a lot of executive coaching, and that helps me a lot with thinking through how executives think and being able to accumulate some level of business acumen. So that's a way I pursue a parallel pursuit. And the next part is optimizing your career brand. We talked about it last time, and I'm going to speak about it here in a second. So I won't go into the detail, but constantly being aware of your brand and being able to know what you want to communicate to who you want to communicate. Nikki and I will talk about this during our Q&A session. Often people come to us and saying, I want that job. I want to sort of take that next step. And then we ask them a second click. Okay, what do you want to do? What specifically have you done to be ready for this? And where do you want to be in our company? Most people cannot answer that because they just took the first statement, they made an action, but they've not thought about how they want to present themselves. Often outstanding human beings, but they cannot present their case as to why they should be considered for the job. And it's an area that the more confident you are, the more sort of framed you are, the better you will deliver that message out there to the universe. And then obviously you start your career. But another item that I think we want to cover is this whole concept of project mindset. And what does that mean? That means is that your entire career, whether you're in a company or you are starting a new job, is a project. So a few years ago, I wanted to learn more about financial management. I assigned myself or asked for help to be on a business modeling team just for a year and a half, only to learn how corporations truly budget and build that organization. Nikki and I did our MBA together, but that exercise for me has really given me a sense of understanding of how that business worked and how that part sort of improves a business. So it's now a project that I took on that now lives with me as a skill set. You may have different things you want to think about, but think about the concept of asking for assignments and those assignments creating capability in you, but you thinking of all those things as more of a project-oriented mindset, okay? So I'm going to pause there and just jump straight into our branding piece. There's a lot to cover here, but I thought this visual will give you sort of all the activity that you should be going through if you want to build some agility. I think most of us do this, but we are not consciously thinking about it, okay? The last, before we go into the Q&A, is your personal branding, right? And all of this agility starts with you. So having your mission, vision, values, the voice you want to have, how you want to position yourself in the marketplace is your messaging. And doing some homework around that and being prepped to do that will improve conversations with recruiters, with hiring managers. Then your constant creation of digital and individual connections. So whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's a slide, whether it's a note you write to people, or whether it's a conversation you have at coffee, you're constantly creating content about your brand, and you need to be somewhat aware of it. And then pretty much the awareness of what are the tools and tactics you're going to take to deliver your brand to the market. Anything from your social media linkages to the way you dress, to the way your resume looks is all about branding. And so the point about this is the more you are sort of buttoned up here, the more confident you will be and the more agility you'll bring to communicating your message. So with that, we'll jump into Q&A.
Thanks, Dilshan. And don't forget, everybody that's listening, the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, if you'll hover over that, it will open and you can type a question in that you would like to ask today. One of the questions, Nikki, for you is, if you don't have a specific job that you're applying for, how do you get a recruiter to actually sit down and have a conversation with you about how you make a contribution to the organization outside of a specific role that you may be applying for?
Oh, that's a really good question. Man, I wasn't anticipating that one. That's a hard one. I'll admit that's a really hard one.
Well, I think maybe Dilshan touched on it a little bit. It's connecting the dots. You know, I always think about people having the capacity to walk into a situation or get your attention by saying, here's what I've been doing and here's how I think that adds value to JCPenney. Could we have a meeting? Maybe that's the kind of thing that you would respond to.
Well, and again, it is a difficult question, and I do think it is around networking and connections. There's always positions that we don't know that are open. Obviously, they're confidential roles, or this is the end of the year, so there's a lot of planning. I would defer back to the connections piece and the networking. If you're networking all the time because you're in a position where you have to find something, then it's probably not the right time to be reaching out about a role that isn't yet posted. I would recommend to always be networking when you don't need something and when you do, because that's when you're going to get that call from that executive. And it may not even be a recruiter. It may be an executive or a friend who heard through the grapevine that there's a role open that, oh, by the way, I know you know someone that you've been talking to because you told me you've been having these conversations. So I would say if you're doing that sort of activity, you're probably not going to be as successful as if you're doing it all the time.
Greg, do you mind repeating that question again? I heard it, but I want to make sure I'm clear and I can maybe contribute to that as well.
Just the idea that you may be seeking a conversation with an organization for which there's not a specific position that you're applying for, but rather, attempting to put yourself in a position to be considered for opportunities that may not even be posted or may not be posted yet.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Nikki is right from a straight line approach, right? You have that dilemma, but I think there's nothing wrong with telling somebody that you're interested, you're looking at career transition, you'd like to be connected to that organization. I mean, I've hired several people that said that to me 2 years ago, and I all of a sudden, whoa,
Exactly.
I have an opportunity. I didn't have it. So what you need to realize is that the return on investment in that engagement is not immediate. So those of you who are looking for something more immediate, that is not a tactical strategy you could take, and you'll be very frustrated, and it's going to test your agility model. I mean, you are going to like implode with being frustrated if you want something immediate. But if you are looking long term, I'm very transparent, and I'm happy to be transparent here. I got the job as chief people officer of Securonics because I was not looking for it. I had told the executive recruiter 4 years ago that my dream was to have a job like that, and should he find something appropriate, we can connect. And every year we'd send notes to each other. I'd share a candidate or two, and then it came to my turn. He said, "Hey, would you want to take a chance?" It took 4 years to get that call. I'd been turned down for some other opportunities that I thought that's what God wanted for my life, but God had a different plan for me. My point is, timing matters. If you're proactive, you can have more time. If you're reactive, you might want to take a different tactical approach. That's my opinion.
Well, it's an interesting dichotomy there too. You're talking about you can be more aspirational in your interest in talking with a recruiter that's not an internal recruiter. And when you are dealing with an organization where you're talking to an internal recruiter or hiring manager, it's good to be more specific about their immediate needs. So maybe that's part of that answer too.
And it is important, right? And Nikki can speak to this. Nikki's job is to drive results. And Nikki is an amazing human being. I know her personally, but sometimes you might get the wrong impression from some of the colleagues that do Nikki's job, that they're looking for an immediate return, because business is about driving results. But if you have the proper conversation, recruiters are always looking for their sourcing pipeline, and they will remember you if you're memorable and if you are thoughtful, but you have to pitch that statement.
Yeah.
Nikki, had any comments on
Yeah.
that?
No, I think what I was going to say, Dilshan said something really good in his session, and I wrote this down, and he said he created an investment fund for career transition.
Mhm.
Now, he may have been speaking from a monetary perspective, but I'll also say from just a mental perspective, you need to also create that mental investment fund. And that goes back to what Dilshan said, investing in networking where you're giving out more than what you're taking in, and it will twofold come back to you. And it won't come back probably when you want it to. It's going to come back when it's supposed to. You know, I always say it's God's plan on everything at the end of the day, not our plan. So we just have to. That's why I love Dilshan's section. It's because there's a mental piece to any sort of, I would say any activity you do, but then also from a career transition. I mean, it's a real, I tell people, what I do changes lives. And so, a career transition is a life-changing activity. And so you should not take it lightly, and be very intentional. And that's why we're here today, is to really help people figure out how to do that in the most successful way that they can.
Ian,
If I may
your
just,
fair share of hiring, yeah. And just jump in, because in the training and development side, how do people do that within a company?
yeah, I would, just to echo one thing Dilshan mentioned, and I think there's what's telling is the intentionality behind his networking, and it is not to be with the ends justify the means. He's doing it because he's a good guy, he's a good leader. He's also helping others, and he's transparent to say, and oh, by the way, this is something I'm looking for. I think there's something to be said about that transparency with your network, where you are giving more than you're asking in return, because if you're helping others, there's going to be that tendency, I think, to also in return. And I've benefited from that with my contacts and some of the roles, and I've seen that with our recruiting team as well. Those that they have kept up with, in a way that has a strategy behind it. It's not an every day or an every week. It's as things change, as news releases happen within the organization, there's some intentionality and strategy behind it.
So some of what we're talking about applies to this next question, but the question is, are there specific recommendations that you would make about seeking more executive level roles? In some ways, we would be talking about posted positions or jobs that are advertised or individual roles like that. What about for the more seasoned executive leader? Any advice there?
I will take a stab and I'll give you two perspectives. If it's internal, you got to get on projects, and you better get on a project with an executive who can sponsor you. Okay. I've done it the wrong way. I've actually done it with just doing projects, and that didn't result to anything. I just got a little bit of skills. But as I got a little bit more seasoned in my game, I actually asked senior leaders, say, hey, what do you want to accomplish in 2021? How can I contribute to your project? And by the way, these are my aspirations that I want to achieve. So that really was a little clear. And most senior executives, unless you are brash about it, actually enjoy people like that. And you just need to be very succinct about it. And they will take you on because they're all trying to achieve something extraordinary in their career. So that's internal. That's not easy. I'm not saying it's like boom like that. You better have a good reputation. You better have good performance reviews. And you better have your sponsor or your boss have a good relationship. Those are hard things to always do immediately, but if you plan for it, you can achieve that. So that's inside the company. So outside the company, you obviously need to work with executive recruiters. They got to know you. I'll be honest with you, just applying for an executive role is not going to happen. So you need to be sponsored as well to an executive recruiter or somebody who knows your skill, because these executive jobs are the game-changing jobs and most people don't accept them if you just apply. Obviously, those are not always true statements, but I've found those to be important. Be sponsored or be networked in the executive jobs. And I'll hand it over to Nikki because obviously she lives it every day.
No, I think Dilshan really summarized it really nicely. I would say he's spot on. Many of those executive level roles, when you look at them, if they're VP and above, if they're posted, quite honestly, a lot of times we have networked enough, or we've networked internally to already have a slate, or that slate's going to be built very quickly. So if there was one piece of advice that I would give you is, I would say, if you didn't listen to the first session, go back and listen to the first session and plan. Be very planful. Know what that role is, know what that company is that you're targeting, and then start doing that research on who are those individuals within that company that you're interested in, that you can connect to. Figure out who the recruiters are, and you can probably even figure out who the hiring manager is. And you have a genuine, I would say, being transparent and genuine always trumps, hey, I just want to get an executive job. You really need to be planful. And I loved, Ian said intentional. Be very intentional about who you're communicating with. Don't blast, and I'm just giving this advice, please don't blast every single person in the organization, your resume, and tell them that you're interested in something. Because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get it 8 times. And by the 8th time that I've gotten it, quite honestly, I'm like, oh, wow, this person's very persistent, but they weren't intentional. So that's what I would say, the intentionality, but then also go back to the first session and be very planful and know what you're looking for. But then also, you're in the game, you're the player, know what you have to offer as well.
Great point. And in that regard, sometimes having access to thought leadership or an article that you've read or something that you feel like is germane to a conversation you may have had with an executive in an organization you'd like to join, you're now sharing knowledge, information, you're participating in that dialogue can help as well. Ian, any other thoughts on that before we move on?
I think the one thing that came to mind, and I'll defer to Nikki from expertise on that. One thing that was going through my head is there's going to be those roles that you may not be 100% ready for. So if you know, if this is I think Dilshan's got a great example. It's 4 years. There's a book years ago I read, Leader as Coach, and one of the items it outlines is a gap, self-gap analysis. I think we're all familiar with that, but in this one's a little bit of a twist where you take the role you want. And I've used this with some of the staff that I've worked with. You take the role someone wants and you go through their abilities, their skills, and their perceptions. And you have to do a bit of a critical analysis. And from that, you can decide, are my skills equal to the abilities for that role? And from that, you can start making very specific SMART goals that I think we're all familiar with relative to that long-term goal. So if it's I need to get better at financial modeling, well, that may be a goal, and this role needs that. One of the things that just came to mind is during that season of waiting, that's also a chance for you to be very intentional about setting back and having your own development in mind, because that is then something you can speak to from a recruiter standpoint. Here's what I've done to get ready for this, along with my day-to-day job.
Yeah, great point. Last question, I think we can wrap up on this one. What are good rules of thumb on following up with a recruiter or decision maker after submitting an application before an interview? In other words, how to be proactive while waiting.
I'll
Nikki,
take that question. Yeah,
thank
I'll
you.
take that question. If you kind of go back to the slide where I talk about the player and kind of your role as the player, part of that role when it says understanding the rules or, understanding what that process looks like. So I think it says before and after. So before the application, I think it's the networking piece, figuring out who you know and who somebody else knows and seeing if you can make that direct connection, especially with the recruiter. Nowadays, you can look on LinkedIn and you can figure out who's posted the position. Now, after the interview, I think that you have to ask the question, what's the timeline? It's very simple. What's the timeline? When can I expect to hear back from you? And here's the next one, which a lot of people don't ask, if I don't hear back from you by this date, is it okay if I reach back out to you? No recruiter is going to tell you no. I promise you, they're not going to tell you no. And the other piece is, can I also reach out to the hiring manager? Now, they may have a little bit of a hesitation if you say that, but it will put in the recruiter's head, hey, they really want me to follow up with them. Keep in mind that sometimes the process may take a little bit longer, and we may be in a process where we're trading people, where we're changing the rules a little bit along the way. In this environment, things can take a little bit longer, but you have to ask that question, what's the timeline? When can I expect to hear back from you? And then secondly, if I don't hear back from you by this date, then can I contact you?
Great. Dilshan, other things, proactive waiting, ideas or techniques?
Yeah, look, I mean, I guess I would go back to Ian's and my original conversation. You need to do your discovery. You need to have a plan. I intentionally shared with you guys the 4-year thing. I've had many other opportunities, but I mean, 4 years is a long time to wait. And I got to tell you, I was losing my patience. I mean, when I talk about this stuff, it's academic, but I've also practically gone through it. You really need to build that agility. You have to play a short game. So in my case, I actually took over the head of HR for our technology division. And one thing my father always said, focus on what you've been given. So when you nail that thing, don't be too distracted. That was a hard thing to follow, although Dad said that, but I nailed my head of HR job at Sabre, and the season had come for me to do something else. And all these 4-year planning, these passive conversations became active conversations because the timing is right. So I will actually go back to faith. You got to pray and you got to be patient. And in God's good time, things will happen to you. But I will tell you, I've told this to my kids, I've told this to my wife, God helps people when people help themselves to some aspect. You may disagree with me, but do the work, and in the right time, you will get what you need out of life.
Ian?
I think what Nikki and Dilshan shared, I think is spot on. I wouldn't really have much more to add on.
Well, and it's good to remember, Dilshan, your point is well made. We've talked about Ephesians 2:10, that verse that says God actually has prepared things in advance for us to do. And it's important to stop and think about that for a minute. The creator of the universe stopped what he was doing, looked forward in time, and knew who you would be at this moment of time and need, and has prepared things in advance for you to do. So trust that. This is not about God not being able to do things without your help. It's about his love for you, the desire that he has for you to live a life that's full of joy and purpose and meaning. And by doing that, to live in such a way that you become the ambassador for Christ that God really intended us to be in our relationship with Jesus. So thanks for.
Greg, I gotta
all
tell
your
you,
thoughts.
Greg, I gotta tap into my fan club regularly because I'd forgotten some of that. And I'm a very faithful person, and I know some of my colleagues on the phone are as well. But you need that fan club, that squad. It's not
Yeah.
just about the job, it's about these other things that go through your mind. And the world is, having a lot of, turmoil and things going on, and you can lose sight of that. But I have a few people on my fan club that are very faithful people that they come to me at times that I need my own coaching. So it's important to go back to remember your fan club is important to you as you continue to manage this journey.
Yeah. Nobody gets there alone. And in times of turmoil and transition and uncertainty, you need to connect to other people and have people around you who can pray with you and encourage you and give you candid feedback as well. But don't isolate, don't make this a sole proprietorship of finding your next opportunity. Make it a team effort. And as Dilshan said, find those 3 groups of people who can encourage you, love you, and potentially hire you as well. And focus on developing those even before you need their help. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is a real privilege to be able to share this with you. Thank our panelists, Nikki and Ian and Dilshan and Rob, for your patience and perseverance in getting things done. And I cannot tell you how much we have depended on and appreciate Tess Jamerson and her technical help, her encouragement along the way, her setting all these things up. Tess has been a fantastic partner. And so for each of you that's joined us, we hope you'll join us again on December the 15th, for our 3rd session in this trifectorate. And we look forward to being a part of your time and experience then. And if I could, let me just close in a word of prayer, and then we'll go. Father, thank you for convening this group. We pray everyone that's attached to this conversation today would be blessed by hearing from faithful followers of Jesus Christ, that you would give us a sense of your presence in each of our lives, that you protect us and guide us and give us peace even in the midst of turmoil, because your sovereignty is really what's in control of the world today. We love you, and we ask for your presence in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the 15th.